Amazing. Welcome back to Motivated Masculine Men, the podcast where we, interview people, have conversations that men sometimes struggle or have challenges to do. The whole purpose of this podcast is to inspire, educate, and challenge men to embrace healthy masculinity, deepen their relationships, optimize their health, and step boldly into their purpose. And today we have a guest that I've been following on LinkedIn for quite a while, and he's law enforcement over in the United States, and also does some good coaching and is helping people in multiple different facets. So I'm excited to hear about kind of your journey, Eric, and also to hear like more in depth kind of what you're doing, because I think it's really needed out there for this like coaching and growth for law enforcement and then people, but also to hear how you're bringing your law enforcement kind of background into it as well. Eric, tell me a little bit about yourself because, as always, for the guests that haven't listened before, maybe your audience on here, we literally have not spoken before right now. And we've hit the record button. So I want to know a little bit about you, Eric, and who are you? So, because I have, treated as if I have no idea. I've done a little bit of research on you, but treat it as if I have no idea, and then we can go from there. And if you have any questions about me, feel free at any time to ask, ask me questions as well. It's a two-way street here.
Well, once again, I appreciate you for having me on. But a little bit about me. I've been in law enforcement for right about 14 years. Early years of law enforcement were kind of rough, like I say, because I started when I was 20 years old. And as you know, being in law enforcement, it's a lot to take on. If you don't know the true mission of being a law enforcement and what all comes with it, it was a struggle. Even being in law enforcement wasn't something that I planned on doing. I went off to college when I was 17 because I graduated a little early. Went off to college to be a business major because my cousin who I trained under, like, doing martial arts. I'm supposed to take over the karate part of the karate school, with the financial part of helping run the business part of the karate school. And so I went to college at 17, and no one told me that I shouldn't just make or take 8 a.m. Come on, tell me that because and now you wake your own self up, get your own stuff together. Opinion of it was that if I wake up at 8 a.m., at 10 a.m., I'll be finished all my classes. I have time for myself. I can eat, party, do what I need to do. It just didn't go the way I wanted to. So eventually I had to academically withdraw. I started working at what we call a local grocery store called Kroger. I was there for a little bit. My mother kept bothering me, saying, you need to do something, find you a trade, get back to school, do something. Well, we had a special duty officer working at that Kroger. One day my mother was really on me. She was like, hey, find you something to do. I said, you can't just be sitting here spending at a grocery store. That's not what I sent you off to school for. So he was talking to another person about becoming a law enforcement officer. He was telling them that you're always going to have a job. I say the pay might not be the best, but you're going to have fun and you can have a decent life. So I picked up a flyer, went to the academy, joined up, and I've been doing it ever since. And in the midst of going through the law enforcement process, like I said, I've got my master's degree, I got my bachelor's degree, I've got several instructor certifications and different things along the way. So as becoming a man and becoming a better law enforcement officer, I've learned a lot about life. Like one, about how to handle yourself because being law enforcement, you're held to a higher standard. Early law enforcement, I didn't understand it. And my outside life got me in trouble at work, which I didn't understand. I'm like, well, I'm off duty. Why does that matter? It doesn't work that way in law enforcement. In some jobs, it doesn't matter. In law enforcement, it does. And being a male, I said, usually in law enforcement, you know what comes with the badge and gun and uniform. Like I say, if you're single, it's fun. There's a lot of things that go into that. But I just didn't know about it. And like I said, it was a lot for me, and I had to work my way through it. But as I progressed in my career, I've taken those lessons with me, and I try to teach others not to go down that same rabbit hole down went down.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know if I wasn't lucky enough or I was blessed that I didn't, but I wasn't single when I became law enforcement. I was actually with my wife, and I was one of those ones that proposed to her at graduation. For me, I was along those kind of that same thing. I was looking for a career. I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I met my now wife, pardon me, I was wanting to go work overseas on super yachts. And continue my sailing background because that's how I got to New Zealand, 5 years on a sailboat, on a 40-foot catamaran. Then I met her and I was like, nah, I'm gonna see where this goes, and got to find a career, and dabbled in different things, and then kind of fell into law enforcement as well. Just kind of my brother-in-law actually was like, dude, we should join the police and be like, bad boys. We can be partners and kind of have that fun. Not the best way, like reason to join the police, but I got into it, absolutely loved it, but yeah, didn't have that single life. But still, it's that same thing. Like you go in and you're like, I remember my first week, I called my wife up. I was like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing here. they're telling me like I'm gonna have no life. I'm always on. I'm always once I'm a cop, you're always a cop. Like I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I signed up for the right thing here. But yeah, over the years, it helps you grow, especially as a man, and you see a different perspective of the world. Eric, I'm interested. Let's just dive straight into it. How do you feel, as a young man joining law enforcement, how did that kind of set you up for the trajectory, to be the man that you are today, if we go down that kind of road to start with?
Born in young in life has set me up for me not being mature enough. It set me up to actually gain maturity over time. And like I said, I had a lot of shortcomings and shortfalls because what I did in my spare time affected me on duty, and it helped me mature that, hey, no matter what you're doing, you always must operate in excellence. And most people don't understand that. They're like, okay, well, I could party on the weekends, I can have fun, I might get into a bar fight or whatever and do all the craziness and come back to work. It doesn't work like that in law enforcement, I'd say, because all it takes is one issue to happen, and then your whole career could be messed up. So as I get older, and I try to tell younger officers, hey man, I know you're having fun, I know you're young, you think you can do all this. I said, all it takes is one big mistake, and this can all be over for you. So you just got to be more conscious of what you're doing. And then as you get older, you can explain it to people a little bit better. Even like I tell my kids, like, hey, man, even though you're in school, one mistake can mess you up. And so, like I say, it just helped me to be more mature being in law enforcement because from like 20 to about 24, that's when I finally start getting it and understanding that, hey, man, you got to stop doing this foolishness. But I said, I've done some crazy stuff. I will say this, I've done some crazy stuff in law enforcement. Once I get to 24, I started understanding, hey man, you can't be out here just doing what you want to do. I say, because it's repercussions to that. And a lot of people, they just don't understand that. And you hear all the time people say, well, I want to get in the car chase, the foot chase, I want to take bad guys to jail, which is fun, which you'll do. But even for that one car chase, the foot chase, they don't understand the 3 hours of paperwork you're going to have to do
Three
to make
hours if
sure
you're
that that
lucky.
case sticks. Yeah, I
3 hours
say
if you're
they just don't understand everything that comes with it. They see things that happen on TV, like on Law and Order, Chicago PD shows I like, but they think you're gonna handle a whole case with a shooting in just an hour.
yeah,
That would never happen.
yeah.
But they just don't understand that part. So
What's your thoughts on the Rookie?
I never watched it. I have not watched
You haven't watched The Rookie. It's the same thing though.
it.
Like they solve a case in a day. It's like, wow, man, I wish we could solve a case in a day. That'd be so much.
It'll be a lot easier. I promise you that. I don't understand. And that's why I tell people about law enforcement. I say the good thing about law enforcement is there's so many different paths you could take.
Yeah.
For me, I've always been a proactive law enforcement officer. But some people like traffic. Some people like doing DUIs and wrecks. If you call me to a wreck, I'm gonna be upset. That's not something I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I say, but some people like working homicides, some people like working gangs. I always like working dope and guns. So many different things you could do in law enforcement. Like I say, you just got to find your niche. And that's why I tell people law enforcement is such a unique field because you have so many different things you could do. Like I say, if you want to do child crimes, you have that. That's not my cup of tea. As you want to do financial crimes, I say, while the payoff is big, but you're going to be behind a computer all day going through all that stuff. So you just got to figure out what works for you. And like I say, when you first start into law enforcement, you'll have that time to see what you really like. So that's just helping you mature, help you figure out what you really want to do.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I don't do it anymore, but I ran a business helping aspiring police, pass their fitness testing and set themselves up mentally for about 5 years for law enforcement, especially here in New Zealand. And I say it all the time. Law enforcement is the best job in the world, but the hardest job in the world. I'm not in it anymore. I decided to not go back into it after I burned out PTSD, almost got a divorce, almost became a statistic, and decided to get out of it. And now I kind of don't have a whole lot to do with it, with law enforcement so much anymore. But my heart's still. What's the saying? Once you bleed blue, you never. You always bleed blue.
Yes, sir.
It's so true. But it's so good to hear your positive talks to it. As a young man getting into law enforcement, or even just a young man trying to find his way, when you were, say, for example, when you were trying to find that career and you found law enforcement, so many, you look at all the stats out there, I watch a lot of, interviews and podcasts and just, you see it on the news all the time as well at the moment. So many young men are struggling to find their drive, find their purpose, find their way. What's your advice or thought thinking, or how did you know that law enforcement was going to be the one? How did you choose that thing to help that young man that might be watching or listening, or maybe his partner, wife, mother is watching this and going, hey, how can I help my son, partner, boyfriend find that kind of direction? What would be your kind of thought process or advice to that person to help them kind of find that direction?
Thing I always tell people, and I try to teach people, is that they need to write things down. I said, writing things down is going to help you out. So if you figure out 2 to 3 things that you feel might be an interest to you that you might want to work in. Write those 3 things down, and then I say you'll write 4 to 5 tasks of why and what you need to do to accomplish that. For me, when I started in law enforcement, there was nothing I even thought about. Like I said, I was always into martial arts. I was into chasing females. I was into partying and having fun. It never came up. I just happened to get into it and I kind of fell in love with it. And then, like I say, talking to my sheriff, who was my old mentor, I say, in my first job, he made me resign because I was just doing too much craziness. But he told me, he said, "Hey man, if you grow up and mature, you can actually do a lot of good in this." And I'll tell people, I say, I'm going to have the heads up because you have so much on the internet which you can look at to figure out exactly what you want to do. But you got to have a plan. I didn't have a plan, and I winged it. Just by the grace of God, I was able to come back on top of it because I had times where I didn't think, I'm like, "Hey man, I don't think I'm gonna make it out of this." But it comes up. But people need to write things down. And that's why I tell people, even daily, like I have a journal now where I write down my whole day. If I have a goal, I write it down. I give me 3 to 4 tasks to help me accomplish that goal. I tell people, write things down. It's always going to help you out. So if you get out of college, when I get out of college, get out of high school, you need to decide whether I want to go to the military, I want to go to college, do I want to pick out a trade? Those are your 3 things. Do you figure out from there, you can break it down to what you want to go to. Because everyone doesn't go to college. I've learned that. Everybody doesn't want to go to the military. Everybody doesn't want to pick up a trade. You got to figure out what's good for you and then start working there. But as a young man, you got to focus because we get so hyped up. We're like, okay, I don't know if you remember this or not. And I'm telling myself a little bit. I remember when I was younger, going to college, well, even before I went to college, it was me being young. They had these videos called Girls Gone Wild. So I thought college was going to be like,
Remember Girl Gone
yeah,
Wild? Man,
yes.
you
So
look at it and be like, oh, is that what? Yeah, no, let's go do that. That looks
yeah, yeah.
fun.
Like this is going to be a grand time for me. I said, this is what I was going to expect. This was nothing like that. Even a little bit. I say it was nothing like that. But like I say, you start looking at these things, and that's why I tell people, I say this social media, TV is good for you, but it's always gonna be bad because it can give you a false impression of what life could be like. So those are things like that you gotta make sure you be cautious of. But like I tell people, you go to college, do what you want to do, make sure you stay focused. And so if you want to find your trade, I say I know people that are plumbers, I know people that are electricians and welders. You just got to find out what interests you. And once you do that, you have to make a serious plan on how to accomplish that. It might be a 6 month plan, might be a year plan, might even be a 5 year plan, but you got to accomplish that. And like I try to tell people, things won't happen overnight. So we all fail, and we're gonna have to keep trying. I've been there before. I said, I'm like, I want to do this, I want to do that. It didn't work out that way. Like even for me in law enforcement, like I wanted to be an instructor. It took me 3 times to get that class under my belt. 3 times I had to study for that class. I was under the perception that it's a law enforcement class just to teach law enforcement officers how to learn, like how to teach them different material. It wasn't anything like that. It was about classroom dynamics, ADDIE system, KSAP, and different things like that. So it was pretty difficult. So write things down is one thing I always tell people to do, and make sure that you stay focused on that list. Because if you just write stuff down, you just let it be. Start checking things off and building on it so you can accomplish your goals.
Yeah, man, that's such good advice. Especially it gives you something tangible to stay focused on, and men especially, we need something to be focused on. If we have nothing to be focused on, we get pretty lost, and we do go do crazy things. I mean, I was like you before my now wife. I was yeah, had some fun. Let's just put it that way.
We'll leave it like that.
That's what it was all about. Let's just have fun. Yeah, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we were having fun. But yeah, Eric, what would you I mean, what would you class? I want to know your opinion, your thoughts, especially from your years as law enforcement. What's your thoughts on kind of masculinity? What would you kind of define masculinity as? I'm curious.
I just think of it as just, and I hate to sound cliche, but a man being a man. But I say a lot of time, and I have friends that tell me, so a lot of these people nowadays, not to sound cliche, but they just don't handle things the right way. Like if someone says something to them, they get so offended by it. They don't take criticism well. They don't handle pressure well, and they fold under it. And say being a man is you're supposed to find a solution. And masculinity you're supposed to find a solution to what's going on. You're not supposed to sit there and just power down and just cry about it. Like somebody comes to you, but hey man, you're not doing what you need to do at work. You're not supposed to be the person that runs like, okay, well, they're not doing the same thing. You're not saying anything to them. Me, I'm going to find a solution. I'm like, okay, well, he said that, hey, I'm not doing my reports the way I need to. I'm going to take the classes I need to make my reports the right way. I'm going to start getting extra help. And I believe masculinity is just being that man, that provider, the person that's going to try their best to find a solution to the problems that happen or problems that they're faced with. And a lot of people just don't see it that way nowadays. They seem to want to post blame, or they seem to not want to take control or ownership of what's going on. And one of the best books I've read just recently was Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And
Great
I'd say
book.
that book right there, yeah, that book right there kind of explains masculinity to me. Like you're gonna take ownership for everything that happens in your life, whether you have control over it or not. And that's why I tell people about being leadership. If somebody's under you and they mess up on you, at the end of the day, you gotta own it. Maybe I didn't train them the best way. Maybe I didn't tell them the best way to do this. So it falls under me. So basically, masculinity to me is basically taking ownership of everything that's in your life. No matter what happened, I messed up. I need to work on it. A lot of people can't do that. And I say it took me a while. Like, when I first got let go of my first job, I say I blame my chief. I like, man, he didn't like me. He didn't want to see me succeed. Honestly, when I look back at it, he was doing what's best for me. Because if I continue down that road, I know I wouldn't have been in law enforcement. Might have been locked up. It's just different things like that. But taking ownership is what I was going to say is part of being what masculinity is, or what I define masculinity as. But you got to be able to take ownership of anything that's going, whether things are going right or whether things are going wrong. You got to be able to take ownership over it, and then you got to be able to work toward a solution if things are going wrong.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. On that ownership piece, you okay to like? Can we talk about your kind of younger years a little bit for a minute, just to kind of help those younger guys? When you were younger, because I'm thinking back to my younger days as well. I'm like, oh man, yeah, they're pretty bad there.
So I got a movie.
In those early days, why do you think, or why do you feel yourself you were kind of so all over the place? Let's put it that, and again, I don't know your story, so I apologize for any kind of if I'm using the wrong words here, but that kind of all over the place, kind of trying to be a playboy is what it sounded like. I'm bringing out my own kind of story here, I think. But why do you feel that you were going down that track in those early days?
Well, I just didn't understand responsibility. Like I said, I felt like I could party, I could do what I need to do, and just get up and do whatever. I didn't understand that I had responsibilities, not only to myself, but to those around me. I have responsibility that, hey, I'm starting to get older now, and so I'm working, saving money, trying to work towards getting me a house, car, and different things like that. And I didn't understand that concept. And then like I say, once I got a little bit better understanding of responsibility, kind of moved away from those things. At the same time, I still wanted to have fun. And like I say, that's what it boiled down to. And I'll tell you a little bit of what happened to me. Like I say, I started in law enforcement when I was 20. They put me in a specialized division called housing. And essentially in housing, what you do is you go from different housing divisions and you patrol those. So it's me and another guy. Well, I did my job. I worked. I was a good officer. You might not believe it, but back then I was pretty fast. I was good at foot chases. As you get a little bit older,
We
you pick
all
up
were
some
when we were
poundage.
younger.
Yeah, pick up some poundage through that time. Essentially, when I got off, it was just all about females and partying. And eventually, what came to a head was two females got into a fight at a local KFC, which is a chicken place.
Yeah, we got KFC here as
Yeah,
well, and a lot
yeah.
of audiences in the U.S. You gotta love that KFC.
So they got, and I didn't tell anybody to fight anybody, but they got into a fight at the KFC. Police were called. This is where I worked at. They were called. They talked to them, brought them down to the police station. They got to arguing there, and they asked them like, "What's going on? Why is all this happening?" And they're like, "Because of Officer McCants, which is me. I wasn't there. I didn't tell anybody to fight." Dispatcher heard it. I used to talk to the dispatcher, so they all three got into almost a physical fight in the police station. And the solution was why all this happened was because Officer McCants time I wasn't there. I didn't tell anybody about anybody. So my chief called me here like, man, I don't know what you got going on, but you need to get this together. He said, I'm not gonna say any much else about it. You need to get this together. That was just one of those lessons that I learned that, hey man, you can't be doing all this crazy stuff because I say it's gonna have a reflection back on you, but now on you on the agency. And like I said, you're going to be held to a higher standard than anybody else. No matter what they did, no matter if they went to jail, if your name is associated with it,
Yeah.
you're held to that higher standard. Just being responsible and knowing that, hey man, you can't be out here doing this, no matter how much fun you think you're having, going down to the bar, getting drunk, having people carry you out. While it was a good time, while I enjoyed myself, you just can't do those type of things. So that's what happened in my early years. And just learning how to be more responsible for myself and take ownership of what I had going on was just something I had to deal with. And like I say, it took me a while now. It was something that a couple of times I just figured out. It took me some years to get over that. And I tried to help others not go down that path because it's easy to go down. I
Oh
promise you,
yeah.
it's easy. And I say temptation is really, really easy, especially if you're in law enforcement. I say, but you can get jammed up really quickly. And that's why I tell people you just got to be mindful of what you do. Even us now, like, you don't remember what you put on MySpace and all that stuff, but all that stuff can come back to bite you now.
Yeah.
And you see it happen. So I remember being reckless, talking on MySpace and just saying all kind of crazy stuff. And you never know. I said, I don't think my MySpace page is still up, but That's why I tell people, you see all the time, people said something on Twitter 10 years ago, it could affect you in law enforcement. They could be like, oh, well, you said this and that, and they should know you're getting fired or let go because of something you did 10 years ago. So if they can learn responsibility now, first coming to law enforcement, they can understand that, hey, man, got to be mindful of what I do. So that's just what it
How do
is.
you make sure, I'm curious, how do you make sure that cautiousness doesn't turn into paranoia, especially in law enforcement? How do you do it?
Yeah, I just got to weigh the pros and cons. Like I said, you got to understand what you're doing. Like before you do anything, make sure you weigh the pros and cons. Like, okay, well, maybe I might go to the bar with my friends. Maybe I would be the responsible one. Instead of having 10 shots with them, I'll have my two. I watch, I enjoy the mood, drink the sweet tea, not get involved in all that. But you gotta be somewhat cautious. Like I said, you got to think about it. Because as a law enforcement officer, you go into any house, you go to any business, you're gonna be looking around for your threats and all that stuff like that. You gotta think the same thing about any type of situation you're gonna put yourself in. Okay, if you know this person has been known to be crazy, and I say as a male, you know, like, oh, this girl's always been crazy with everybody else, but she's cool people. Maybe it might not be the best idea for me to try to date her. You're like, okay, hey man, it's cool. You got to think about those things, but us being men and just being young, we just think, okay, man, this is gonna be a fun time. We're gonna have a good time at the bar. I'm gonna have a good time with my friends, and next you know, you're in a bar fight. You're in handcuffs. Happens all the time. That happens all the time where I'm at. Like I said, we're military town, so you'll have soldiers, Team 19, come down, party, and next you know it's a big bar fight. Next you know they got to explain to the people they're under command under about what happened. So that's why I tell people, I say, you got to have that cautiousness around you. Like, you got to think about it before I go out. Like, I know my friend, let's say his name is Tim or Vanshay. I know that they get drunk and they like to fight. So maybe you should mix the two. Okay, let's just go to a concert and we don't drink. Or let's just go out somewhere where there's not alcohol and let's just eat. But if you put them together with that alcohol,
Yeah.
what's more than likely going to happen. And then you being a good friend, you're like, well, I can't let my friend fight by himself. And you're involved in something that you didn't. So it's just things like that. Like you got to think about it. Like, hey, man, before we do this, let's try something else. Let's try something different. And it's kind of hard, because especially if you're a social person, 10 of your friends are going out to the bar. Like, hey, Eric, come on out. And I said, they're going to peer pressure you. You're going to be like, now stop being a P. Come on out here, enjoy time with your friends. You get pressure into that. You got to think, well, I'm bigger than this. I won't sit it out this time, fellas. I'll catch you next time. And it's just something you got to learn over time. Because being law enforcement, you got to understand, you can't put yourself in those type of situations.
I mean, law enforcement's next level, but even still these days, it just with social media and everything, I feel like more companies are cracking down on that kind of your image
Mm-hmm.
because you are, I mean, I work now in sales in a hotel and it's in my contract around like, there's the values and the ethics side of things, but even just there's a whole media and social media area in my contract around like how I post and what I kind of, not so much what I talk about, but there is a thing of you still represent the hotel that you work for, you still represent the employer that you work for even when you're not working, especially
Mm-hmm.
this day and age because it can bite you. Social media does so much stuff these days. Eric, leading on from what you were saying, I'm curious, how do you, I want to get more clarity on the kind of how you don't let it all become too much. And what I mean by that is, I know I'm speaking from experience. This is where I ended up. I ended up doing our version of Secret Service, and I got hyper paranoid. Thought everybody was out to get me. Thought people were following me. My wife couldn't leave the house without me giving her some sort of look over your shoulder, watch your back kind of paranoia conversation. And in the end, it completely shut me down and destroyed me. Obviously, I'm still here. I worked through it, and I almost got a divorce and everything from it. How do you prevent yourself, or what do you say to those young officers or young men or even young women, but that you're talking to or interacting with, so that they don't end up down that road where I did, as such, where you're so hyper vigilant that you actually have no life. You don't go out to concerts, you don't go out and do any kind of partying, you just become a hermit in a shell. What's your, how do you prevent yourself or guide others to not get there?
I tell them to find that happy medium. Like I say, you never want to go out there and think that nothing's not going to happen. Because as you see today, that something can happen in any situation, but you got to say, okay, well, I'm trained enough that if something does happen, that I'm pretty much trained to take control of the situation and handle those people in my circle, get them to say, if I need to do something else, I can handle that part. But then you go, the other side is that, hey, man, I'm not going to sit out here and go through every person's payroll and see if they have weapons. But I say, as law enforcement, that what makes it kind of hard. Like I say, we always look at people. We certainly look at the shirt to see if they have a bulge. Okay, maybe that person has a firearm. Maybe they're carrying a knife. And you hear And it happens to me, like if I go out to maybe like fair or something like that, I hear people arguing something. I might not be on duty, but it's gonna make my senses heighten. I'm like, I'm gonna start looking towards that way because I'm starting to make a plan in my head, like, hey man, something might go down on that right side of me. Let's start moving that way. But I can't stop the fun that my kids are having and all that stuff. So I try to tell them, hey man, continue having their fun. Like I say, I try not to worry too much about it, but I always keep it in the back of my mind that hey, something's going on over there. Maybe just keep an eye on it, but not to put my whole focus on it. And that's the problem that most people have. Like if they see a situation, they see a problem, they do what we do in call shooting. We become flip side focus. Like we focus solely on what's in front of us, that problem, and we stay there. I say you still gotta know about your threat perception. You gotta look what's around you, and you gotta understand, okay, well, maybe that threat's not close enough to affect me. I gotta still enjoy the time I have. But I say it happens to a lot of law enforcement officers. We'll go out, we'll go to the mall or something, we'll see somebody about to get into an argument or fight, and be like, okay, let's go back home. And I say, that's going to happen anywhere you go. You got to be able to understand, okay, maybe I don't need to go in that same area they're at. I can go somewhere else and still have fun because one of the worst things you could do is make your family suffer for what you feeling that might be a problem. And they're not going to see it the same way you do. They're like, well, I got to leave. Well, then what's going on? I said, they're not bothering us. And you're thinking ahead, like, hey, man, I can see that bulge. I know he has a firearm on him. This can go bad if it turns that way. They don't understand that part. But also, it comes with explaining. And most time, what we don't do is we don't explain to our family what we see and what we know. Like we think they're supposed to understand, okay, like they're about to argue, this could be in a fight. They don't go to work with us every day. They don't understand that, hey man, we see people argue, we'll see people fight, and we'll see it turn to a shooting and a murder in less than a minute. They're thinking like, oh, that's on TV. They don't see it like we do. So that's something you got to explain to your family as well. They got to understand where you're coming from. And then, like I said, you got to find that happy medium. Like, okay, Chuck E. Cheese is not the place for us to go today. I said, let's go to the batting cage. Let's go for a run. Let's go for a swim. Let's try something different. And just try something differently, but don't pack it up for the whole day because that's just going to cause problems. One of the worst things you could do for a kid is you say, okay, man, we're going to go Chuck E. Cheese for the day. You get there, something's going on in the parking lot. Like, okay, where you gonna go home? Find a solution. Like, okay, man, let's go to the trampoline park or something like that. And it's like I said, you just got to find that balance and find different solutions to help those problems. Because I've been there before. I go into a room, I start looking at everybody and start analyzing everything, seeing who might be a problem, who seems to be frowned up, who's sitting in the corner being quiet. But I say I can't turn my whole attention to that because one, I like to eat a lot and I go to restaurants a lot. I'm not gonna mess up my food, let my food get cold, trying to worry about what this person got going on. I say you can't do that, but it's hard to do in law enforcement because I say we're
Yeah.
taught to figure out what the threat is. Like we go to a party and it says a whole bunch of individuals arguing also. We're gonna look for that person that either is arguing or the person that's walking out real quick when they see us. It's just something we're taught. But we gotta learn to kind of turn that down. Not turn it up, but turn it down when we're out and we're not on duty.
I love, there's a couple key things that I really picked up in there that, I've learned from getting too far down that rabbit hole and then coming back. And this isn't just for law enforcement either. It's for men out there as well. You have those men that are, that care, that want to protect their family, their partners, their friends, and that they will see that not to the level with law as us with law enforcement will, but they'll still see it and they'll still want to interact. They'll still want to protect. They'll still want to, provide those kind of that safety to their family, to the friends, to society. But I love that side of rely on that training. It was something that I got told after I left law enforcement, and I was in a crowd of about 5,000 people for a personal development conference of all things. And I was in there, and I remember turning to somebody and going, "Oh my God, like I don't think I can be in here. Like this is just nuts." And the first night, they actually have you anonymously write on a piece of paper and hand it all in, and then they read them out, like the worst thing that you've done. And it's about release, is what it's all about. And so when they're like
Mm-hmm.
saying these things up on stage at the end of the first day, there's a 5-day conference of about just personal development and growth and like really changing your pathways and changing who you are. And like, I mean, there's rapists, there's people that have like bestiality, there like all these different things, and they all these people want to make these changes. And day two, I came in and I talked to one of the people there. I was like, I don't think I can be here. And they're like, why not? And I told them, and they're like, okay, Chris, well, what kind of training do you have? I was like, you have no idea. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, cool, Chris, well, why don't you just rely on that? What would happen if you relied on it? And I was like, well, yeah, maybe. They're like, okay, cool. Something happens here, threat happens. What are you gonna do? What's the first thing you're gonna do? I was like, well, I'm gonna find my wife. She's in here in a different group. Like and she's just over there. I know exactly again, that training. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, then there's 6 exits in here. There's one behind that curtain. There's two behind those curtains, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, Because you just told me things that I didn't know. Why don't you just rely on that training and let your gut actually follow you along and actually be more present, be here and communicate? I was like, I love it. And so I love the fact that that you're teaching people out there those tips and tricks as well, because it's so important. And then I wanted to highlight the fact of like, don't let your family get destroyed or like, get affected as such. Don't make your kids, punished because you're like, oh no, I can't be in Chuck E. Cheese because there's people, here that are arguing or things like that. Let's create a different
Mhm.
solution. It's so good, and it's so important for men out there to hear that you got to constantly create new solutions and keep moving. Yeah, Eric, that's great. Have you had a time where you've been in a situation or you've had something hard happen that you weren't quite sure how you were going to get through it, but then you managed to?
Yeah, well, me, I'm a real big thinker. Like I always think worst case scenario for anything that's going on. Like like being in law enforcement, you're gonna have your chief or your lieutenant come on the radio. Hey man, let me see you at the station. Before I get to the station, was on 10 minutes. I'm going through everything I've done in the last couple of months. Like, okay, did somebody complain on me? Did I do something off duty? And also, I'm thinking like worst case scenario, and which at the time I don't know if I'm getting in trouble or not. I'm thinking like I'm already here, my stomach's tied up and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm hyperventilating out of air. You don't even know what's going on. But like I said, I'm working myself up because I'm thinking that, okay, man, I'm about to be in trouble about something I've done. And I say, I haven't even done anything. So I get to the office and they're trying to congratulate me on something I've done, or they're trying to give me an award or something. And like I said, I just messed up almost my whole day, started sweating for no reason because I started looking at the wrong thing. So that's what I try to do is like I try not to focus on that. And I tell people, and I'm really honest about it, like I start going to therapy. Like therapy was good for me. And my brother told me, here, like, man, you look at things differently as law enforcement, how you thought about therapy. And that threw up a red flag. Like, first of all, I don't need therapy.
We don't do
Second of
therapy. We'll
all,
lose it. We'll lose it.
yeah,
We'll lose our badge and gun if they find something
I'm
wrong with
saying,
us.
and I told him, I said, second of all, I said, that could affect my job. He's like, but you haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, you understand, you go in there and say the wrong thing, they're going to take my gun and badge. And he was like, no, I'm just saying sometimes you need somebody that's unbiased, that doesn't know you. You could go in there and just talk about it. I remember my very first therapy session. I was with the law enforcement. He sat on the edge of the couch in the corner and he tried to talk to me. And I just gave him short answers. Like, what's your name, Eric? What do you do for a living? Law enforcement. Like, well, what's really bothering you? Nothing. Give him those generic things. But over time, I became so comfortable and talked to him. I got told him that, hey man, in high school, I felt like I should have been prom king. I wasn't even a person that put in to be on the prom list. But I felt like I should have been prom king. I felt like I was a cool enough guy. I say little small things had to come out. And then from there, you can start taking down the layers and some of the problems that you have going on. And that's one of the biggest things that we face, especially in law enforcement. If you're going through something, talk to somebody. I had the problem of I'll come home, I'll seclude myself, try to figure it out myself. Sometimes you can, but for the most part, you need to talk to people about those problems that you have going on. And I tell people therapy is good because if something's going wrong, go to therapy. If something's going right, go to therapy. You're there to talk to somebody about what's going on in your life. You're not there to try to get all your feelings out and just mag dump them. And they're like, okay, well, you got a lot of issues going on. And then law enforcement, we have issues thinking that time we go to therapy and time we say anything, that they're going to take our gun and badge. Unless you're out there just saying that you want to come out here and just kill 20 and 30 people, they're not worried about that. If you're saying that, hey man, I might have a couple of issues with drinking, I might have a couple of issues with females, males, I might have issues that I want to fight people all the time. That's what they're there for. People don't understand that. And that's one of the hardest things that I get people to even fight. Hey man, maybe you should try therapy. And then you hear therapy, I don't need therapy. Wrong with me. I'm not crazy. I say, so I'm crazy because I go to therapy. Since you don't go to therapy, you're not okay. I say, I guess. So that's just something that we deal with. But I tell people, you got to find that solution for you. And for me, therapy was good for me. Some people it's music. Some people it's going to the gym. You got to find out what works for you to help calm your mind because your mind play tricks on you.
Yeah.
You'll start thinking about the worst thing that could happen or the problems more than the solutions, and then you go down that rabbit hole. So you got to find out what works for you. And I tell people, for me, therapy was it for me. It took me a while to do it. My brother told me for like 2 years, but it took me a while to get to that point.
Yeah, no, yeah, I can relate to that. Therapy is great, man. Like, especially when you find a really good therapist. I think that's a real key thing as well. Not just for law enforcement officers that are listening, but for anybody out there that, wanting to go. I remember having a conversation with somebody, something happened at work, and obviously being the law enforcement guy at work, they came to me and had a conversation. It was outside of work. Somebody got followed, and yeah, it became dangerous. And they're like, what can we do? What asking kind of the things around it to do. And I was like, well, first off, how is the lady doing that got followed? And they're like, she's doing okay. And that I was like, would she be willing to kind of have a conversation with me? And that they're like, well, ask. This was HR talking to me,
Mhm.
and she ended up having a conversation with me, and I said the same exact thing. Have you thought about going to we've got free services and stuff here that you can go to a counselor, or you go to a therapist, and have you thought about doing it? She's like, no, 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 I'm all good, I'm all fine. I was like, hey, look, I've done it. I still do it. I still will sometimes just randomly be like, cool, I'm going to access that free service just to have a different perspective in a conversation, because you never know what's actually going on, and you might be affected by it in ways that you didn't know. So I love that, that you're open and you're talking about that. And men, we do need to talk more about it. I'm curious, Eric, as well. When you're saying that, I was like, from a masculine point of view, from a men's point of view, back in the millions of years ago, we had our fire circles. We had our circles of men that were not just all to do with the same thing that we did every day. And even still now, we still have those kind of circles. And in some aspects, law enforcement, I know it can be very hard because, as you said, you got to be cautious of who's doing what and where we are. But do you have a circle of men or a circle of friends that are outside of, like, that just do different things career wise, so you get different perspectives? Or who do you circle yourself around with?
Now, I will say I am one of those people. Like most of the people I do hang out with are law enforcement, but the person that I'm really closest to is my cousin. He's the one that taught me martial arts. And the fun fact is that when we used to do all the craziness back in the day, he was a little older than me. He was the person there now. Believe it or not, he's the bishop of my church. His father was archbishop, and he taught us martial arts. And I just remember how he was as being a man, and that's where I get my leadership style from. He was firm, but he was fair. He was going to tell you what he thought about the situation, but he's going to explain to you why. When I was younger, I just didn't understand it. My uncle, he had a whole bunch of cars outside. He always said, if you take care of me, I'll take care of you. Me and my cousin thought, like, man, let's go ahead and wash these cars, get on out the way so we can go do what we need to do. We want to go bowling and all that stuff. He'll come out there and inspect the car. He'll be like, I just have to do the job. I didn't do what I need to do. But when we did it the way we were supposed to do, he paid for everything. He'll like, your phone bill need to be paid. Here's some money, all that stuff. And that's why I tell people that you got to have people outside it. So my cousin, who is actually the bishop of my church, is one of the people that I hang with and one of the people that I talk to when I'm having issues or problems. Because I say we all gonna have them. You need to have somebody that can talk to. And like say in law enforcement, you got to get out that thing of just everybody can't be in law enforcement. I say you don't get so circled in that the only thing you believe is that somebody from law enforcement. That can't be how it is. But it happens to us a lot because most of our friends start coming from law enforcement, the people we're on shift with, the people that we do work with, and that could become a problem because we're only going to see that one side. So, like you said, you got to find people outside of that. So, my family, because I have an older brother, he's nowhere near law enforcement. He doesn't do that. And he's one of those people that always give it to me raw. He's just the one that if something's going on, I'm going to talk to him about. Like, he knows things about me that no one else knows. And he's going to give me a solution to it. He'll be like, he's, at the end of the day, man, you're doing stupid stuff. I say, and that's why this is happening to you. So, you need to fix that. And he was the one that told me, hey, man, you're sitting here crying to me about these different situations, you need therapy. Therapy. And me and him had this battle for about 2 years. He's like, Eric, you need to go to therapy. I would say, you need to go to therapy. I don't need therapy. So it's one of those things, but you got to have somebody outside law enforcement. If you ask most of the people in law enforcement, what you think about therapy? See them.
Be
You want
careful what
somebody
you
to take your
say.
gun and
Be careful
badge?
what you say.
Yeah,
They'll use it
yeah.
against you. I remember that's what I got when I at
Mm-hmm.
the final day. Be careful what you're saying, because they'll use it against you, even though it's anonymous. And they don't technically. They'll find out. They'll use it against you if you make one mistake. It's just like, if you're in that kind of department, you need to be out of that department. To be perfectly honest,
Yeah, yeah. I
workforce.
mean, you gotta think outside the box, and people don't understand that. But a lot of times, you get it from the older individuals that have been there for a long time, and they assume that things are like that. It's just not like that. Like there's so many things that can help you out as far as mental health and talking to a therapist. You could do it online, you could do it in person, but people don't want to do it because they're scared. They're like, okay, if I tell them any little thing that's going on with me, they're gonna take my gun and badge. Can't have that. That's why you got to have people outside law enforcement because people in law enforcement are going to tell you that. Hey, man, don't go in and talk to them people and tell them what you got going on or what you've seen out here, but they're going to take your gun and badge. Not the case. So that's why I tell people, and like you were explaining, like you got to have people outside of your box. So I have those individuals that are outside my box that I can explain the situations to, and they can give me a different viewpoint of what I have going on and maybe a different solution.
Also, is something that I wish I had done more of. Hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? They also bring you back to reality.
Hmm.
In these high pressure roles, even and again, we're talking a lot about law enforcement here, but for the person who's not in law enforcement, these are all really key things that you can insert in, you can implement into your life in general as well, because it's just going to take you to that next level. You know, if a law enforcement person who's at that hyper like kind of, you know, level is implementing things, it's like a high performance sports person. You know, you learn from them, and then, you know, maybe you don't want to be high performance, but you just take a sliver of what they do, and, you know, you're going to be so much further on than, you know, the average person. But uh that the people outside of what you do or your norm bring you to reality as well. They sense check you. You know, I know as law enforcement, you deal with the bottom 2% of society consistently.
Mhm.
You've got to be brought back to reality and realize that the other 98% of the society is actually not evil, and they're not out to get you.
And that's the issue that we have, especially like if you work in like a specialized division, and I've seen that happen more. Like I said, I worked with the U.S. Marshals Task Force, and all we went after were like people that committed high aggravated crimes. And so I'm thinking like everybody's out here murdering people or having charges of rape and different things like that. And you got to fall back and be like, everybody's not like that. Don't sit here and start judging people before you meet them. Like I said, you meet somebody new and you just start tackling things about, okay, this person might have done something back in the day. You can't be like that. You
Hmm.
gotta take it for what it's worth. Then you start finding out things, and then you might feel like, okay, well, maybe I don't need to talk to this person. This person might be cool, but people on the outside will tell you that, like, they'll tell you that, hey, man, just because you go into a restaurant, you don't have to sit there and just analyze every single person that's coming in. If a kid's over there acting up, you don't have to sit there and stare at them and all that stuff. You got to figure out how to get out of that. That's why people outside law enforcement is really good for somebody that's in law enforcement. It's a help that balance that you need. Most of the time in law enforcement, especially if you're like on a road patrol division, or you might be in narcotics, or you might be in gangs, you start only hanging with the people that's in your division. You got to break it up. Let's say why you want to hang with them, you want to create that family experience. You got to have other people outside of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, where you focus, your energy goes. So, you know, if you're constantly focused on, you know, because of work, you know, you're constantly focused on the rapist. You know, I've got a guy. He's become a fairly good friend now. He was in child trafficking, cybercrime in Arizona. And like he talks about how it just destroyed him in that, because again, you're in that focus all the time. You're seeing that side of the world consistently. And he's like, he started to believe that that's how the world was.
Yeah, see,
And
I had
it's
a
not.
partner like that does that too. And he said like every 6 months they make them go on a retreat for
Yeah.
mental health and all that stuff. Like, I'm gonna tell you, that's not my cup of tea. I don't want to be anywhere near that. I say, because I get into the interview room with those people, it's not gonna go the way I expect it to go. That's not my cup of tea. But like for people, like you got to have something outside, and like if they're giving them mental health treatment, help
Yeah.
them cope with what they got going on, why do you think, especially law enforcement, that if you go to see a therapist, that they're gonna take your gun and badge? They're just
Yeah.
trying to help you cope with what you have going on.
Exactly. Exactly. Eric, are you married?
I
Yeah.
have a wife and I have 5 kids.
Wow, go you, man. How do you have time for all this self stuff? I mean, geez. No, that's awesome, man. So obviously you met her once you were in law enforcement and that. I want to talk a little bit about relationship side and helping young men find relationships, because I think it's a huge thing that young men are struggling, or even older men are struggling with at the moment. Then we can kind of talk about how you keep that relationship, because there's two folds to a relationship. There's finding it, then there's
Hmm.
also keeping it. And as law
Hmm.
enforcement, I know it can be, you know, I mean, what is it? Law enforcement have the highest divorce rate out of any career, I think it is. So, you know, there's a couple of things that we can talk about here. How did you, you know, find your wife? I know it sounds like possibly a different era. Maybe it was before the swiping left or right, or, you know, that, but like my wife and I, but yeah, how did you find her? And then what's your advice for that young man out there who wants to find an intimate relationship, and might be, you know, struggling, challenged, or doesn't know kind of what to do in this cyber strange world that we live in my opinion.
Well, me and my wife, we actually met through Facebook. Like I say, back in the day, this was when I was a little bit younger. I was writing stories on Facebook. I used to write short or writing notes, and that's what kind of got me in trouble. And like I said, I just didn't understand that stuff can get me in trouble. But anyway, I met her through that, and then eventually we talked. But like the first couple of years, we were just talking and dating on and off. And then eventually, I figured out, hey, this might be kind of serious. We're taking each other pretty serious. And like I say, it took me a minute to get it right. Like I said, I was just young. I didn't appreciate it because my wife was a little bit older than me. And I didn't appreciate what we had going on. So eventually, over time, I was able to build that bond that she might have already liked me truly for who I am. Then I started to appreciate her for a person. And I said, okay, maybe this could be something special. if you're used to being young and crazy, you feel like, okay, these things are only going to be temporary. Like, no matter what, you got to get out that mindset that people are only in your life for a period. Some people are in your life to stay, but you got to have that mindset. But you got to find somebody that you know is going to be compatible. Like, they got to know that you're a great person, but they got to know your flaws too. And most of the time when we're dating and we're in relationships, we don't want to show people our flaws. And that's the issue we have. We don't want to, sit there and argue with them because we're like, okay, they might not like us. And I'm not saying that you got to go out there and have arguments with people, but you got to understand, like, it's okay to have disagreements. And then after you have a disagreement, you come to a mutual understanding, like, okay, this is my point, this is your point, and this is where we're at. Most people don't want to do that. Because, we all put on that front when we first meet somebody. And I say, okay, well, hey, we're always going to go to Longhorns. We're always going to go here. Like I say, you got to show them your genuine self. You got to show them how you act where you're not trying to put on that front because you're going to marry somebody that you only put up an act. And then you get into the household and you're with them every single day. And then the ugly side stuff comes out. You're like, man, who did I actually marry? So people got to get out there. And that's why I tell men down around, hey, man, you got to be honest. If you have a problem with something that somebody's doing, you got to let them know. But you got to take the same thing. If they have a problem with something that you're doing, you got to change. Like, if you're somebody that comes home, you go straight to the game, you're on the game for 8 hours, and she has a problem with that, like, hey, man, maybe you're going to play for 2 hours, but you get upset about that, that's something you need to work on. And same for her, you be like, okay, well, he likes to go out every weekend. I prefer to stay home. You tell her about it. You can sit there and get mad and not let her know what's going on. So communication is something that we have to work on, especially in relationships, because we don't like to talk about the problems. And we want to talk about the good things. Okay, well, you make me feel good. I love you. I miss you and all that stuff. But we want to talk about, hey, man, hey, you don't clean up enough. I say, you leave trash everywhere. You leave your clothes out here. Different things like that. You got guys, we all have our little things. We all have little things that just gonna bother us that we just can't deal with. Then somebody that smacks, I can't deal with it. Like, man, I'm telling
Yeah,
you,
you have your
it is what it is.
non-negotiables. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that's
this is just not gonna happen.
you get to eating a biscuit or a piece of chicken and you just smacking. That's part of it for
Well,
me.
I think that just comes back to kind of what we talked about before. One, there's some aspects that you were saying, it's that extreme ownership.
Hmm.
if they say I'm having, and again, it's like honest communication. If they're saying,
Hmm.
hey, I have a problem with you coming home and playing the game, playing games for 8 hours, I don't feel like you're actually paying attention to me. Then it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, how do I solve that problem? How do I make sure that, and then vice versa. If you have a problem because she's coming home and gaming, 8 hours after she comes home and not spending time, it's that I'll also take that ownership of, hey, you need to communicate what your needs and wants are as well. It's also, like you said, communication is so key. If we rewind just a little bit before we jump into, how you've stayed married and had 5 kids, going to like this modern era, because how long have you been with your wife now?
10 years.
10 years. So
We've been married 10 years, but we've been known each other for 2012, so about 13 years.
yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So, how for the man in this modern era, which I know we can't really talk hugely to because we're not, trying to find dates and stuff out there, but there are common threads that have happened throughout history that helps guys find a partner. What would your advice be to a guy who's looking for a intimate partner? Like he's at that stage of his life where he's like, I feel alone. I feel like I want to find somebody. The woman that I find, it just doesn't work out. I can't figure, I'm struggling here, but I want that. I don't want that party animal, just one night here, one night there, the fling type situation anymore. I want to actually kind of settle down. What would be your advice to him to find that life partner in this day and age?
So it's a little different now. I will say, if I say things are so digitized, but honestly, like I say, they got to figure out what they're looking for. Like you got to understand like what your non-negotiables are and what you're willing to work for. Like some people are okay with people going out every now and then, and I'm not telling you that you're going to change a person, but sometimes you got to be willing to work. Like you give some and you take some, but you got to figure out what's going on from the very beginning. Like I said, you gotta understand, like, hey, if you're just thinking this is gonna be like maybe a 1, 2 night thing, say that first. But you be like, okay, well, I want something real. I want something that's gonna be sustainable. Then say that. Don't sit there and try to sit there and wait until it's too late and then it's over with. Like you gotta have that communication. And that's the issue that we get into. People like, hey, we don't communicate it enough that, hey, man, I'm looking for something serious. Like I want something serious. If that's not what you want to do, don't get me wrong. I like you. I enjoy the time we're spending, but we just can't go any further. You got to be honest with people, but you got to also know what you're looking for. So if you get somebody around and they don't meet up to your standards, but you knew that before you start dating them, you just wasting your own time. And what we get into is that we find somebody that, okay, they have a good personality. We like to hang around them, but they do things I don't like doing. And you know that person's not going to change. We try to force them to change. That's not going to work. But hey, man, hey, I like to go on long walks. I like to go on trips and all that stuff. I like to go out and do all these different things. If that person doesn't like that, and they tell you that, hey, this is the stage I'm in. I like to go out, I like to have my fun. I'm still young. Then it's really no need to waste your time on that. But us, especially men, we like, okay, well, I can change them. I can make them to the person I want to do. And we get to this thing and think that we can mold people into what we want them to be. Sometimes you can, most times you can't, because they're going to have their things, and then you end up getting through these situations that you don't want to be in. So communicating about what you want and being honest about it is what's going to help you out. But we just don't have that nowadays. But like I say, you got to be vulnerable too, because you got to be able to tell it. Because as men, it's hard for us to say, hey, man, I'm looking for love. Most men just can't say that out loud. I'm 21. When I was 24, 25, that was something for me. I like, look, say, nah, I said, I'm looking for somebody I love that I can grow old with, have kids with. It's not going to take advantage of me, and it's kind of hard to try to keep your masculinity when you're saying those things. Because most people feel like you're going to be weak when you say those things to women. You're not. You should be open and honest about it.
It's actually
But
strength.
we can't.
It's
Yeah,
strength.
but
It's strength and honesty.
most men can't get past that. They feel like, okay, well, I'm just being weak. I say she's going to think of me that way. No, you're just being honest of what you're looking for. And most times they're going to be like, okay, I respect your word for telling me now what you're looking for. And still lying. But I say, don't get me wrong, I've lied. I've done my fair share of lying. I'm looking for love. It is what it is. You learn to grow up past. But you got to get to that stage where, yeah, man, at the end of the day, this is what it is. This is what I want. If you don't want that, keep on moving. But like I said, most men are not going to be honest about what they want. So if you're tired of dating and stuff, like you got to be honest with people. Like you can't be out there on these different websites looking for dates. Like you got to say, I'm looking for something serious. And if you are on the website, put it in your profile. Like I'm looking for something that's going to be sustainable. That's going to be a real relationship.
And then
Don't sit there and just say,
it's backing your words up. Don't be one of those guys out there that says it and just so they can get the women, and then you screw the women over for all the rest of the guys.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Then you got to go through it with that. So, but yeah, and that's just the issue that we have. But like I say, like relationships and dating is just something that's crazy. Like I said, I see my guys that I work with, and just hearing some of the stories that they have going on. I knew I was bad, but man, it's I couldn't imagine.
It's scary out there. I couldn't imagine. I mean, my wife and I have hit rock bottom, and we work through it, and we're together. I'm like, again, and now this kind of leads us into kind of how you sustain that relationship once you get in it. How you stay married for
Mm-hmm.
10 years. I've been married. I'm coming up to 14 years in February. We actually got married in 2012. But we've been together, what is it now? Since 2008. So whatever that is, 17 years now. But yeah, it's that then you have to start to, in a way, kind of pick your battles. Well, what's your thought? Like, how have you stayed married 10 years, 5 kids in law enforcement still? Sounds like, happy as you can. I'm sure you have days where you're like, what am I doing? But, how is it that you've kept the relationship, and the spark going for 10 years? I mean, if that's going on, maybe you have some challenges going on at the moment, but how have you done it, Eric? And then I can kind of talk to how I've kind of done it as well.
Just working through the solutions and admitting when I'm wrong. Like one of the biggest issues I had when I first started, I was going to admit that I was wrong. Now you're wrong when you do it, but honestly, like I said, that communication part. I say we're both born in January, we're both Capricorns. We both had this hard headedness about us. Like if we're upset at each other, we're just going to other rooms. We won't talk for days. I say, and then next you know, somebody be like, oh, somebody's got to say something, and it'll be something stupid, like nothing that gets to the point, like, hey man, you hungry? You want something to eat? And then we'll start talking again, and the next you know, we'll work through it. But like I said, we've had our days when I come home, I'm like, okay, we probably gonna end up going hands in a minute. But I say we just keep bumping heads. This is something that you gotta understand. Like you gotta understand, like every day is not gonna be sunshine. You're gonna have bad days. It's how you work through those bad days is what keep you there. And people don't understand that. Like, they look at TV and they look at different relationships and they only see the good part of it. And like when I first got in law enforcement, like I said, I was young and naive. I thought like once you got married, that was it. Like you didn't do anything else, you didn't cheat, anything like that. Once I got into law enforcement and I see how wild things were, I was like, man, these are different people. And like I said, I guess I was sheltered, or I just didn't think about it. I thought like, hey man, once you get that piece of paper, it just protects you from not doing anything outside the marriage. So going through it in my marriage and just saying the problems, issues that we face, like I said, we'll argue, we'll fuss about the kids, we'll fuss about dinner and stuff like that. But you got to have that communication. And as a man, we come bullheaded. Like, hey, when I say goes, you can't be like that. I said, I know how I am. It's me. I'm not a person I just argue, but shut down. I'll just stop talking. I'll be like, okay, you got it. One word. Okay. All right. And we'll just go back and forth. And then eventually, like I say, you'll have to find something stupid to talk about. Hey, man, you need some gas in your car, you want something to eat, and then you'll work through it. And what I've learned is, and it might not work for everybody, I'm not one of those people that's going to want to talk face to face. If I do, you're going to see my facial expression. You're going to see that I'm getting annoyed. Me, I've always been a writer. So either I'll write you a long email, I'll send you a long text. Okay, this is what bothers me. This is what's going on. This was the problem. Then I say, hey, if you want to talk face to face, I'll listen. I might not respond all the way to it. But if you want to work me, I can go from there. That's just how I am. That's how I communicate. But you got to find out the communication that works for you. Right? So you're going to have problems. You're going to have issues. You're going to have some days you're like, okay, well, I just don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm tired of it, but you got to fight through it. And I say, if it's something that you want bad enough, you'll work through it. But I say, you're going to have those problems. No relationship like that. And if you're looking at somebody else's relationship, all you're seeing is what's on the outside. You don't see what happens when they close their door. And you learn that lesson in law enforcement. You're like, okay, you see these happy couples out there and you get called to their house and you see the chaos that they deal with or what's going on. And you're like, fuck is this? I'm like, but what is this? I thought y'all were perfect. No, it ain't like that. I say, when they close them doors, a lot goes on. And you got to understand that for your own life. Like, hey, man, you're going to have problems and situations that come up. You got to learn how to deal with it and deal with it together. Can't be like me because me, I'll shut down on you. I say, you get to argue with me? I go, okay. I'll go in the room, just get on my phone, just play the phone. Can't be like that. I had to force myself to get up and try to talk. I say, it's a battle. Even now, it's still a battle. I'm like, man, I don't feel like talking. And we can say a couple words, see if we can get this conversation flowing. I say, if we can get it flowing, we can start with it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we just need 2 or 3 days away from each other. So
And sometimes that space is
it's
important.
needed.
It is definitely needed. I love that, the communication is the number one thing. My wife and I say the same thing. Communication, brutally honest. Even if it's possibly going to hurt the other person in the short term, be brutally honest. And at the end of the day, what's meant to be will be. If with those really bad fights, if you're meant to be together, you'll work through it. You'll figure out a way. You choose what you want. I remember when I was younger, and even now, people say, grass is greener on the other side, and this and that. I was like, no, grass is the greenest where you water it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want that relationship to last, you've got to put that effort into it, like it sounds like you do. I'm curious, how does your wife communicate? Like when you guys argue, you shut
Mm-hmm.
down. What does she do?
She's the same way. Like she'll go days while I talk to me. I say she'll sit there and talk to the kids, talk to everybody in the house except me. Well, okay, all right. So I see what type of day we're having. All right. And eventually she'll sit there and she'll write me a text message or email about, okay, man, this is what the issue is,
Mm,
the problem I'm having, this is what we need to change. Like this is what's really bothering me. And like I said, it takes her a minute, just like me, to say something about it. Like I say,
mm,
she's one of those people, she'll let things build up and she'll keep letting build up. And then next you know, it just explode. Like she's not gonna get argumentative or anything like that. Then she'll just start shutting down on everybody. Kids come
yeah,
like, what's wrong with her? I'm like, huh? Just let her have a moment. I say, let her have some time. I say, hey man, you want to get your nails something done? I give her a little money. Hey man, go take some time for yourself. And the problem that I had when I first started dating, or like when I first was in relationships, was like I tried to force myself. Like, hey man, you talk to me. Let me know what's going on. Sometimes people need their space first. Like people need to get
yeah,
themselves together. They need some alone time. Like even though you're married, you got to have some separate time from each other. Like you don't have to be in
you
each
have to.
other's face 24/7. Like I said that can get annoying. I said, especially if you have somebody that's real clean, like that's always in your face, always giddy. Like everybody's not like that. Some people need that space. Hey man, let me go to the gym. Oh, I want to go with you.
Yeah,
I gym for myself.
yeah.
Some of those things. But yeah, she'll shut down. She's just like me. So
It's just like you. Well, at least, at
yeah.
least, at least, at least you know it. You know how to deal with it because it's like
Like,
looking in a
you
mirror.
picked up over years. Over the years, you picked up on cues. Okay, you can tell.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? She just walk past you.
Yep. Yep. And I love that you touched on the fact of like doing stuff for yourself. There's so many relations. I don't have kids myself, but I got lots of friends that have kids. Watching and be coaching in this realm as well, and helping people and doing these podcasts and learning. You learn a lot about kids. Relationships with kids, and I saw it in my parents as well, is once the kids come along, you lose a couple things. You lose the doing the stuff for yourself. That's kind of happens when you get into a relationship. Then there's
Mm-hmm.
kids involved, you lose the doing stuff as a couple, and
Mm-hmm.
everything becomes around the kids. So I'm curious, Eric, how do you twofold make sure that you keep doing stuff for yourself that fills your tank up for you specifically, just for you, so that then you can turn up to your relationship, to your kids? And then two, how do you and your wife make sure that you stay implementing things for your relationship so that you guys are a strong couple for your kids, especially when you have 5 kids?
Well, planning is always going to be the biggest thing. Like I told, like you got to take out time. Like, okay, man, it's been a couple of weeks. We haven't spent no time together. And what day are you free? I'll tell you what day I'm free. We're going to plan this time out. to have some time together. And like even for myself, like one thing about it is like most of my kids they're older now, they're all in school. So like my wife might be at work and on my days off, I'm off, I can go to the gym and do things I want to. But I said, try to get those things done before everybody gets home. Like I said, you got 5 or 6 hours, take care of yourself in between that time so you can have the time you need with your family. And I tell my wife, like, hey man, sometimes we need to take vacation together with all the kids and ourselves, and then sometimes we just got to take it by ourselves. Scheduling things and writing things down is always going to be big. Don't just try going to whim because say something will come up. That's why you got to have plans in place. Like I said, you ask your grandparents, like, hey man, can you watch the kids for us for a couple of days? We're going to go out of town. Make those plans. Make it happen. But like I said, you got to stay committed to what you want. Like if you know you need to spend some more time, because you can tell when it's like, okay, man, I need to spend some time. We haven't had enough alone time. Do that. And then with self time, okay, man, I haven't gone to therapy myself. I haven't went to the gym. I haven't taken care of myself. I need a couple of hours to myself. You got to make that time. And sometimes you're like, okay, for her, like I'll take the kids today. If you want to stay home, you let me know. If you want to go out, I'll make that happen. I'll have the kids. I'll make sure they're straight. So if I need to get them up early and take them out the house for a couple of hours, I'll do that. You got to have that type of communication.
And you think about the other person as well, think about what they kind
Hmm.
of need as well, so that, when you do need to have that time on yourself, there's that kind of reciprocating kind of factor. And
Hmm.
again, it comes all the way back to that communication, communicate,
Hmm.
schedule things, make a plan. So, so true, Eric. Eric, so I know you're doing, we've talked a lot about, your law enforcement career and that. I know you're doing some coaching stuff. This is why I reached out to you on LinkedIn. I saw that, you put a post up saying that you wanted to kind of build and help some more people on the coaching side. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing on that side. And then also, how an audience member, somebody watching, somebody listening can get in touch with you if they want to kind of, talk more to you about it and maybe, get your help on that kind of coaching side.
Well, I offer life coaching. I've learned over life that a lot of people, they just don't understand how things work. Like, life is not what I expected, and I tell people that all the time. That hey, man, I thought life was going to be a little bit easier. Like I said, I look at my mother, and like I said, I never see her struggle with things. And I tell people we all battle with those mental battles that we have going on, those obstacles, but we don't talk to people about it. And I try to help people through it. And what I learned that helps me is, for one, talking to people. But two, I find out either music or some type of physical activity or something like a podcast or laughter helps most people out. Between those things, but you got to make time for it. Like you can't sit there and just try to fit it in. Like you got to make honest time for it. Like, if you need to make an hour earlier to make these things happen, you got to get an hour earlier and make it happen. So that's why I do on the life coaching part. Also, I teach a class called Leading with Grace. Because a lot of people are placed into leadership, but they don't know how to lead. They think that, okay, I'm in leadership. I'm going to tell you what you need to do. Then you need to go do it. One of the things you're going to learn with in leadership is that people are going to hit you with that question, why am I doing this? And you can't come up with them and just say, because I told you so. No, you got to understand that, okay, man, I need to go ahead and explain this before you even put it out. Okay, the chief wants us to work this area. Why? We've been having a lot of burglaries. We have a lot of thefts over here. We're trying to catch these people so these people can have some comfort at home. This is why we're going to do this. The same thing goes with any place that you work with. So you can't be one of the leaders that you come into work and you just have that task and you don't give them any type of direction and you don't tell them what's going on. They want to see the vision. They want to see why they're doing what they're doing. You can't just say, "This is your job." I mean, they're going to do it, but then they're going to resent you. Like I say, I'm not telling you that they have to be your best friend at work, but you got to have that kind of that relationship with somebody saying that, hey, man, I understand that you're the leader to lead me. I need you to work towards this. This is why. I say, one, but I want you to develop into the person you want to be with, me as a leader, and two, because this is the goal of the department or agency. But a lot of times leaders, they think just because a person is good, and you see it all the time, okay, they're a good patrol officer. They're really good. Maybe they need to become a sergeant. Sometimes that just doesn't work like that. I'd say they could be one of the best officers. They can write the best reports. They can do all the tickets. They can have all the traffic cases they need. And when they get that promotion, everything goes downhill on that show. But that's just not what they're good at. I say you got to work people towards their strength. Everybody doesn't need to be a leader or supervisor. I've seen some of the best people. I even see some of my friends. They get into a leadership role. It goes through their head. And then time you disagree with them, he's like, why am I doing this? They get upset and start writing you up. That's not what you need. I tell people you got to learn how to lead with grace. And that's why, so as I told earlier, I'm trying to teach to the people that I lead. But hey, man, I've been through these issues and know what could happen if you continue down this road. I'm trying to prevent you from going through what I went through so I can stop a little bit earlier. And that's why I tell people with my company, Leading with Grace, that's what it's all about. Like helping people become better people. But I say, all you want to do is you want to motivate them, you want to encourage them, and you're trying to push them towards their greatness. You got to help them get better. And anytime you're a supervisor, you should train people up to take your spot. I say you should be confident enough in the job that you're doing that one, they're not going to take your spot, but two, if you were ever to leave, you'll have a good replacement to fill your spot. So that's what I do. So like if somebody wants to reach me, they can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'm in the process of getting a website created for my businesses. So trying to get all that taken care of now. So it's just one of those processes I'm working through.
I'll put your LinkedIn link down in the description down below as well, so that or wherever it sits on the page that you're listening or watching this, and yeah, so that people can actually they can reach out to you, they can connect with you, because yeah, I honestly believe what you're doing is so important. There's so many managers out there, but there's not that many leaders out there. I can count on less than one hand the amount of people that I would actually go, I'd go work underneath again, because they're leaders. They're not managers, which there's a huge difference. We need more leaders, which is great. And as you said, not everybody's meant to be a leader. Some just need to just stay on the street and keep doing the job, and they do a great job, and that's why they should stay there. You leverage your strengths. I love that, Eric. Thanks so much for being open today, for opening up about stuff and talking about things, and I've learned a few things today from yourself. I know that those listening and watching will have learned a lot from you. And again, thank you for what you do out there. Thanks for continue to protect and serve everybody. I know it feels weird being told that. I don't know about you, but every time somebody says thank you for your service, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just doing what I do.
Yeah, I'm just working.
Yeah, but thank you for thanking me. But yeah, but I do, I do appreciate. I'm not in law enforcement anymore, and I have a deep respect for all those out there, especially in this day and age. There's so much stuff, and there's so many things, especially over the last 5-10 years, that law enforcement have had to go through, especially just law enforcement in the U.S. I do want to, from the deepest of my heart, say thank you for what you're doing, both on the law enforcement front, also on the leadership front, the life coaching front. You're just full-rounded, doing a great job, and keep it up on that, on all those fronts, and keep being the good man that you are. Any further words, any final words, or anything else that you want to kind of input that you want to put out there for the audience or for the young man?
Well, honestly, I just want to tell people just to work on their mental health. A lot of times we try to fight those battles by ourselves, and sometimes we can win them, but sometimes we need to reach out, talk to somebody that you're close with, whether it be a pastor, a brother, a person at church, or somebody as far as a therapist. But fighting those mental battles is not as easy as we think it is, and we think that we can overcome those battles. Sometimes we need extra help, and that's perfectly fine. It's okay not to be okay, but you got to admit that to yourself. So that's just something I like to tell people, because most time we're just going to try to figure it out ourselves, and sometimes we can, which is fine. But sometimes you'll need somebody else to help you through it, and that's fine too as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Mental health is not something to screw around with. Definitely reach out to help on that fact. Reach out to Eric, find his LinkedIn down below. If you need anything as well, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to myself personally. Our email is down in the description, but it's brotherhood@motivatedmasculinemen.com. You can reach out, and I'll put you in contact with people. I'll jump on a call with you. Did this the other day with somebody who reached out on something random, was on the call on the phone with them for an hour, middle of the day, just because they needed something. So just, yeah, reach out. You never know. And also remember, guys, you never know who's going through what. So hold grace for people. Thanks for bringing that up, Eric. It's so important, especially in our men these days. The challenges that we all struggle is real.
Yes, yes.
Cool, Eric. So final question I have for you, that I ask all my guests, is, if you could hand every man on the planet a single insight that would unlock his potential to lead, love, and live with purpose, what would you say? Tell him.
Become a master at communication. If you learn how to communicate correctly, I'd say you could do wonderful things. Most time, even though we think we are good communicators, we're not. I say we communicate what we want to. We don't communicate what we need to. So learning how to communicate correctly can help solve a lot of problems and stop a lot of things from happening before it occurs.
That's great words, Eric. Well, thank you so much again for being here. Thanks for being a guest on here. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope all the audience did as well. And make sure you like, subscribe, but most importantly, share this with just one person. Share it out there so that one person can listen to it, because you never know who's going to get what from it, and you never know where they're at in their journey. And that's all I ask, is just share it out. Just tell one person about this episode. Tell them the one thing that you took away from it, and then we'll make this planet a better place for all. Till next time, train hard, test easy. Always my motto. But we love you all, and we'll see you on the next episode.